Well, welcome everybody. It's wonderful for you to join us here today. I'm really pleased to welcome you to this very exciting webinar today about the great work Assistance Dogs Australia have been doing on measuring impact and transforming the organisation. My name is Christy Mansfield. I'm the CEO and founder of SEER Data, and I'm really pleased that you're with us today. I'd like to acknowledge traditional owners of the lands that we're on today. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and Māori people who are on our webinar today, and really grateful that you can join us. As I get started, I'd love to introduce you to Tim and Sandy. Tim Taylor is the CEO of Assistance Dogs Australia. Tim is a Chartered Institute of Management Accountants member and Chartered Global Management Accountant with over 25 years of global experience in financial services and commercial enterprises. Since 2012, he has specialised in large-scale transformation delivery and building high-performing leadership teams, spending 2 years as a non-executive director of the ADA board before assuming the role of CEO in January 2024. Welcome, Tim, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Christy.
And Sandy Blackburn is the CEO of Social Outcomes, and now she's also the founder of Impact Culture Australia, and we'll share more about that later today. Sandy works directly with boards and executive teams to design impact strategy, measurement frameworks, and governance systems that strengthen organisational impact. And the ICA, Impact Culture Australia, is an initiative focused on embedding impact into systems and processes across the organisation. Thank you, Sandy, for joining us as well.
Thanks, Christy.
So for people who don't know about who we are, we'll share more about our organisations. I'll just quickly introduce SEER. We're an Australian for-purpose technology company. We work with not-for-profits, governments, corporates, and organisations across Australia. We're also expanding now into the UK to support access to data and meaningful action from that data for many different use cases, including measuring impact. And so we're delighted to be able to showcase some of the work we've been doing today with Sandy and, of course, with Tim and his organisation, ADA. Sandy, would you like to talk a bit about Social Outcomes?
Social Outcomes has been around for almost 12 years now. So we started when no one understood this language and everyone went, I don't get what you do. So we're a little bit ahead of the curve on that one. But what we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years is the sector has really worked incredibly hard to get to that point where people are expressing, articulating what their impact is in a very clear way. And they're also starting to measure and report on that impact that they're creating for the beneficiaries of their work. So our job is to help that process be as effective as possible.
Thanks, Sandy. And now, Tim, I know we're going to talk a lot about your strategy and your transformation project, but before we do, a little bit about ADA.
Thank you, Christy. We're a not-for-profit. We're actually turning 30 in July this year, so a big year for us coming up. We breed, train and place assistance dogs, and that's specifically for people experiencing physical disability, post-traumatic stress, and autism spectrum disorder. Often that's children, and from a purpose perspective, for us, it's about empowering connection, inclusion, and independence for people with disability.
Thanks, Tim. That's great. So welcome, everybody, and this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to look and talk about the theory of change and how ADA has data activated that, working with us and, of course, Social Outcomes. We're going to talk about the journey that ADA has been on for measuring impact. We're going to demonstrate the impact report, which is embedded on their website. And we're going to introduce you to Impact Culture Australia's Impact Culture Assessment. I can see many people on the webinar who often join us. So as you know, please drop in your questions throughout We'd love to answer those questions. We will have a Q&A at the end, but as we go through, please go ahead and drop questions in. So Tim, let's get started. Your organisation's been on quite an extraordinary transformation, has a very incredible history in Australia. Could you share a little bit about the vision and where you're at on the transformation journey right now?
Sure, thanks, Christy. I think just from a context perspective, organisation began in 1996 out of the garage of our founder, Bob Biggs's home. One client, one dog. And that journey has progressed over the last 29 years to over 200 active client teams. So clients with dogs. And we would have around 300 dogs in our pipeline as such at various stages of training in the organisation. As far as the sort of growth of the organisation has gone, it's been very incremental over many years. There was a decision made around about 2015 that the organisation wanted to expand. And that decision led over a number of years as a fundraising organisation. It takes some time to get the capital together, but it led to two very key decisions that have triggered a lot of the work we've done over the last few years. Those two things were building a national training centre in Western Sydney, which doubled our capacity to train assistance dogs. The second decision was to purchase an organisation based in Queensland, which was a breeding operation, which has multiplied our ability to actually breed assistance dogs. Those two decisions have then led to, I guess, a lot of strategic thinking required as to navigating the way forward. So, I think that's the genesis of where we've begun the relationship, certainly with Sandy and obviously with yourselves, CereData.
Thank you, Tim. So I might just share the theory of change. Can you talk us through this? And Angus, I don't know if it's possible if you can make it slightly larger. So how and why did you develop the theory of change, Tim? Could you explain a little bit more and what it's enabled so far?
Yep, absolutely. So I think those two decisions that we made strategically forced on the board, growing our capacity forced on the board a conversation about what is the future of Assistance Dogs Australia and where are we actually trying to get to. So there's a lot of internal conversations and a lot of soul searching. Creating capacity is one thing, but actually leveraging it and taking it forward is another. So we had to make a decision as an organisation of, are we going to play in a very simple sense a role of just creating more and more assistance dogs and helping more people with disability in a traditional sense? Or is there another way of thinking and thinking about the role we can play in the Australian sector from a service dog perspective? Those conversations just happened to be happening at the same time as I was introduced to an organisation, called Happy Paws, Happy Hearts. They are a brilliant organisation based in Brisbane, and my conversations with them about the role that they play in social inclusion really lit a spark for me in thinking about the way that organisation helps many more people and thinks from an impact perspective to what our organisation might be able to explore. So that conversation for me was my introduction to really thinking about impact for the very first time. Those in terms of understanding impact and thinking about impact, that led me to an introduction to Sandy, which I was very grateful for. because that allowed us to then, as an organisation, work with Sandy and her brilliant team at Social Outcomes on thinking about more broadly the role we play, why we do it. So if you think about what's on the page there, first of all, starting with our purpose and our problem statement as such, why we exist as an organization, we realized that in thinking about our future and the role we could play in the future, we really need to understand why we were here and really get to grips with why we were here. And that statement there, people with physical and psychosocial disability often experience poor mental health, complex trauma, social isolation, and lack of independence, which limits their participation and contribution to society and reduces quality of life for them and their families. That's at the heart of our organization. That is ultimately why we've actually come about, and understanding that was really important to us understanding our meaning and our purpose. So with that understanding as a leadership group, working with Sandy and her team, that allowed us then to think about really being clear about, as you look to the right-hand side, what our strategic activities actually are. I think what we learned going through that process, Christy, was particularly, I think, as a not-for-profit, there is a desire to help as many people as you can, and to often with donors having agendas of their own or goals that they'd like to achieve. It's very easy as a not-for-profit to be steered in lots of different directions. And I think having that clarity of why we're here, what problem we're solving, and then really thinking about what outcomes we want to, what outcomes we do drive, allowed us to get very clear on our strategic activities. And as you understand from a strategy perspective, the clearer you get on what your strategic activities are, the clearer you are on the things that you're not going to do, which can be just as important. So, yeah, that's from a theory of change perspective. We're very clear about our short, medium-term outcomes, being, functional outcomes, psychosocial outcomes, and participation outcomes, all linked back very clearly to our problem statement or the reason we exist, and then allowing us to think about our longer term outcomes, being around our increased independence, our emotional regulation, improved well-being, and very importantly, social inclusion and community contribution.
Thanks, Tim. What I love about what you're talking about is embedding impact really at the heart of all that you've been working on through your strategy and your transformation. And so, Sandy, I'd love to know from your perspective what you've observed as you've worked with ADA, Tim and the team, as they've embedded impact across and throughout the organisation.
Can we go back to the theory of change for a second? Because I think it's incredibly relevant. For full disclosure, for everyone who's on the webinar, is that I'm on the board of Happy Paws, Happy Hearts. And so the reason that Tim was introduced by Zoe to me is because we've done this work at Happy Paws. And it was about blending these two things, really, that was so obvious to all of us. Because what you had, and the way I talk about it, Tim, you've probably heard me talk about it, is we went from a one-to-one to a one-to-many model. And the one-to-one was we had one dog that was fully trained and had made it through all the hurdles, and they're significant to be fully accredited as an assistance dog, with one young person, one adult, one family. So the one-to-one piece, and bringing together a partnership with Happy Paws, Happy Hearts allows us to create impact along the training journey for each of the dogs. So the training and placement of one dog no longer supports just one person, one family, but could now support many, many people along the way. And the Happy Paws, Happy Hearts cohort, or the people that we exist to serve, are the same as those that are described in the purpose statement here. So there's nice alignment around the who. There's a different approach to the what, but incredibly complementary. And then the outcomes are quite similar as well. And so we're seeing similar things happen with a different approach. And there's an incredible power of bringing those two things together so that we go from this one-to-one impact, which means high intensity, to a massive impact for one family, but we're kind of letting impact fall along the way, really. And so the team and I sat down and worked through, and we were building this theory of change and saying there's almost opportunity to grab those ways we can build impact during the process, so that in the training of dogs, people might experience the same outcomes that they would in receiving the dog when it's placed in the home. And also the other thing, Tim, that we talked about a lot was for those dogs that don't, or two things. One is that if we bring people earlier into the process who are on the waiting list, because it's about 2 years, hey, that waiting list for an assistance dog. So
it can be, Sandy. It does vary, but yes, it can stretch out a long time depending on the needs of the client.
Yeah, so it's a long time if someone has to wait, but if they join the program earlier in the piece and then get some of those benefits, they may be clear that in fact they don't need an assistance dog, they need another kind of dog. And so it does allow us to place assistance dogs with those that absolutely need them and find alternatives for those that don't, as well as people participating in the Happy Paws programs that's aligned with the training of the dogs, creates all these outcomes for people that don't need dogs at all, but the engagement with the animals is so impactful. And Tim, do you want to mention what we were talking about before everyone jumped on, about that one participant?
Sure. So from a program perspective, I think that can I step back just a second to actually help that alignment with Happy Paws, so that thinking. I think that when I articulated the context of the organization that invested in capacity, then needed to think about what it wanted to be in the future, and it was a difficult process to go through without really having a framework. So the idea of, do we just stick to a very traditional path, or is there a bigger role we can play? That in itself was us starting to realize that actually we need to think more about impact than about output. So traditionally, as an organization, we're measured ourselves on how many dogs can you train, breed, and place, and kind of success was measured on the number of dogs coming through. So it's about the dog and it's about the placement of the dog. Tipping that around and thinking about how many people can we help, which is much more about impact, meant that we started to think differently, which led to this different thinking about, actually, we've got dogs that are going through this training pipeline that, for all intents and purposes, are not delivering impact until they actually start delivering impact when they're placed with a client. How can we look at that differently, which is where the role of Happy Paws actually comes in. So that all of that thinking, which social outcomes, working with you, Sandy, and the team, which was brilliant, just giving us the framework to really think about, well, why are we here? What are the strategic choices that we do have, and how do they fit with delivering greater impact? That's led us to cement a partnership with Happy Paws of using our dogs in programs that traditionally they would have used shelter animals in.
That's right.
And bringing the strengths of both organizations together. And we started a pilot last year, which we've now, as you mentioned just before we jumped on, we were talking about, we've now started to expand those programs for, in particular at the moment, young adults that are experiencing psychosocial challenges. Many of them, autism is something they're experiencing that is part of the program in terms of addressing their needs. But it's about social inclusion, and we're seeing such great results of putting our assistance dogs together with programs that Happy Paws have been using successfully for many years. The most recent program that completed at our Waterfall site, we had a participant who was nonverbal. So the programs are structured weekly for 12 weeks. And they culminate in the group going out into the community with our assistance dogs and instructors, and completing the program with a and educational out in the community. At week 8, this particular participant, who had been non-verbal when she started the program, actually started speaking in class. And yeah, the impact, the impact on everybody part of the program, and just the people facilitating, is just amazing. It's a special thing. It's a special partnership that we're building as well. Thinking about how to do more with what we have and how do we help more people has led us to this place where we're using our assistance dogs in ways that they've not been used before, and it's having a fantastic impact.
And it really is, Christy, as you said, it's been embedding it. So thinking about how do we look for impact right across the value chain that's been created inside the organisation? How do we think about impact when we're talking about fundraising and recruitment and governance decisions and so on? So I've watched, Tim, over the last couple of years, how you started to thread all of those conversations into systems and processes in the organisation, starting to create a culture where impact is really becoming embedded and people are thinking about that as the first port of call. So it's been so exciting to watch that move from something that was on the periphery to something that's right at the heart of it. As you say, thinking about how many dogs have we placed, as opposed to thinking what's the change we've made in people's lives and how can we change more people's lives than we had imagined.
I think that is that's our biggest challenge. I don't sit here. I certainly wouldn't sit here saying we've embedded impact and we're flying along. This is a journey, and there are so many areas still to work on and improve. So I feel we're so much further along the curve. Having the theory of change gives us a great anchor to come back to. But even yesterday, Sandy, I had our executive team together for a day. And one of the things we actually did spend time talking about was impact, and reflecting on, is it, in terms of embedding, how are we going and what more do we need to do and where more, what do we need to focus on? A large part of it was leadership and language. We reflected on needing, but ultimately, I think it's about systems and how you embed it in your systems. And we spent time talking about our leadership development across the organization and how do we thread impact into our leadership systems so that it's not something we're having to think about as a bolt-on. It's actually, embedded in the way we're doing things. So definitely a journey, but, I would say we're coming along nicely.
Yeah, you're on it, and that's the point.
Yeah.
So Tim, I'll just recap for everybody. So I'm really interested in the partnership, just going a bit deeper. So through the theory of change, you've been able to see, well, we're moving from measurement of outputs to outcomes and improving lives.
Yep.
And looking for ways to partner, because my understanding is that there are a number of highly trained dogs that don't actually meet accreditation, and that was a hugely big missed opportunity. That through a partnership with Happy Paws, Happy Hearts was then enabling the opportunity for those dogs to be, delivering the impact for those programs that Happy Paws, Happy Hearts have proven through rescue dogs. Is that right? So it's amplifying.
I think it's that and a number of different things, Christy. I think the thought process around the driving impact. So starting with actually, how do we think about changing lives? How do we think about doing more of that as opposed to placing dogs, has broadened our thinking to our pipeline of dogs. And you're right, meeting an assistance dog standard. This is, in the service dog world, one of the real opportunities or challenges, depending which way you look at it. But if you're going to maintain standards, it means that there are a certain number of dogs that actually won't meet those standards. Sometimes that can be because of, quite simple things. some dogs just are unable to avoid food. Some dogs can't ignore other dogs. And for us to sign off a dog as being public access tested and able to be in public, our dogs have to be able to do that. That doesn't mean that a dog has no purpose, though. And I think there are times, there are organizations or there are difficult choices to make as to what to do with those dogs. I think traditionally in our organization, a lot of them would have ended up as pet dogs. Pet dogs, by the way, there's proven emotional benefits of having pet dogs in your home, so nothing wrong with that. But dogs that come from, that are well bred, that have good temperaments, that might have some traits that prevent them from reaching the high standard of an assistance dog, can still play roles, especially with people with disabilities. What you need to do, what has to happen is you need to be thinking about how to make that work, and there needs to be that desire to search for impact. So I think that partnership with Happy Paws, the dogs, we've actually started a program which we've called Purposeful Placements, and that is for people traditionally who would not qualify for an assistance dog, however have a need based on a disability. So most recently we had a veteran who has had periods of severe depression, is functional, is working, is not what we would classify as someone with severe PTSD, who would traditionally get one of our assistance dogs. We've worked, as part of our program, we've placed one of our dogs who didn't qualify as an assistance dog with him. And he's written to us and talked about how his life has changed, and in a measurable way. So I think if we hadn't been thinking about the partnership and where we could grow our impact, I don't think we would be in the space of using all of our dogs in a purposeful way, the way we are now, to really drive that impact. I think the role at Happy Paws, where the real benefits. So what we've been doing is working hard on. It's not a traditional partnership, and neither Zoe or I wanted it to be a traditional partnership. It's not a supplier relationship. What we wanted was an active partnership, and we've worked hard to build that, where both organizations bring their strengths to the table and their expertise, and you get a multiplier effect in terms of impact. And I think that's the power of the program that we've got. We're actually Happy Paws in their model use shelter animals to teach people, how to train a dog. And they also, as part of their mission, they obviously have goals in terms of those shelter animals being adopted. With our model, we obviously breed train, and then place assistance dogs. We brought that together. A big part of a training of an assistance dog is being socialized. And a class environment where people want to learn about dogs and training dogs is a perfect way for us to actually build in the socializing with the actual the needs of the dog and the needs of the class. So where we're seeing the multiplier effect is one of the challenges that Happy Paws have in their model is using shelter animals makes it very difficult to go out into community with animals. It's just not, it can be done, but it's not something that is necessarily easy in their model, which means the independence part of what they seek can take a long time to build. That's the core of what we do, is teaching our dogs to be there for independence. So their programs, together with their ability to socialize our dogs and our ability to fast track independence and go out into community, means that we've got the multiplier effect of our model, both models, and so far we're seeing some outstanding results. I do want to say as well, you mentioned fundraising, Sandy. There were multiple different thought processes about impact in terms of why we need to change our thinking from a traditional output model towards a much more impact-focused, outcome model. It's also about talking to, donors and philanthropists and people and foundations, people that want to actually invest into the work that organizations like ours are doing. When you're in an output model, it's very difficult for those donors and philanthropists to really connect with where their money is going to. Once you change your frame and you start to be able to articulate the outcomes that are being achieved, and you can talk to your vision of where you want your organization to go, which is what we're able to do now. We want to help 10,000 people in 10 years. We're very clear about it. So we're moving from a couple of hundred active client teams, traditional model, to actually we are now building towards 10,000 people being helped in 10 years. That is something tangible that prospective investors and donors can identify with. Last year, so we've been on this journey for 18 months now in terms of impact. And the very first thing we did with your team, Sandy, was build our theory of change, and then started to work on embedding that in the organization. What we have been able to do is, from a fundraising perspective, completely change the narrative around what our organization is and what it's trying to achieve and why we need the help. Our general manager of philanthropy has been working with the help of our philanthropy team. We had identified a couple of people who were supporters of ours previously, but in probably a bit more of a disconnected, limited way. As a result of us being able to articulate our theory of change and be able to bring that this particular donor on a journey, 9 months of working with her and her understanding what we're doing. She's just made this week a multi-six-figure donation that we never would have tapped previously, because she wouldn't have understood clearly what we were doing, and we wouldn't have been able to really articulate it. And so there's tangible benefits for us, and it's very exciting, I must admit.
Yeah.
Very brilliant. Very exciting, Tim. And is anyone else excited to be able to talk about dogs and assistance dogs for a full hour in the middle of the day, as the results of measuring impact and transformation in such a significant manner? Tim, congrats, and thank you for allowing us for such fun conversation.
Christy, just before we move on, can I explain one thing about how this all works in terms of the impact creation itself? And it's what we refer to as a gateway effect. Because if we have people who are really socially excluded because of psychosocial disability, whatever it might be, kind of locked up in the home, and government or philanthropy might say, we want people to be included, we want them to be independent and so on. It doesn't happen magically. There's steps that you need to take. And by engaging with animals, for some people, that's the pull that gets them out of the house. So these are people that in some instances don't have a social network of friends, don't spend time doing things outside the house. It feels like such a big deal to leave the house. And what Happy Paws would say to people is, could you help us out? We need help with training these dogs. And if you could just come once a week, we'll train you, we'll provide you with all the handlers. But if you could help us work with these dogs, that would be amazing. And so it's non-medical. And a lot of people would say it's the only time we leave the house, and it's not for a doctor's appointment or something like that. They leave the house to help someone else, but find, in fact, they are themselves helped. And they meet every week with the same people in session. They build friends because, as Tim's describing, it's a 12-week commitment. They meet people who struggle from similar things to their own. They start doing things socially as well. And they build skills they didn't know they could develop, and all of those things. And that's part of the steps that it takes to being out in the community and making a contribution, because now you feel like, I've got friends I can do something with, or I've got skills that I can contribute elsewhere. And so it builds the ability to create the impact that we're talking about. But it's a stepped thing. It's not an immediate thing. And often I think funders forget that it takes several steps in the process. And this is such a good example of what that looks like and the outcomes that you can get if you just take a little bit of time doing it.
Thanks, Sandy. We're going to show the impact outcomes story that is embedded on your website that we've been able to work with you on, Tim, in a moment. But before we do that, you have such a strong and wide-ranging experience of transformation in the commercial sector. And people here today, I think, will be really interested to know how transformation is different, if it is different, in a not-for-profit environment. And it would be really helpful to hear from you around culture. So what has this transformation meant to your team and the cultural shifts that you're driving?
Sure. I think, first of all, Christy, from a sector perspective, there are absolutely nuances and differences. In a commercial environment, your thinking around revenue and funding is very different. So being reliant on fundraising introduces a different risk profile and introduces different challenges to investing in transformation. So I would say that is, in a transformation sense, that is something that is very different. I think as well, if you think about a lot of people that work in not-for-profit, work for purpose, not necessarily for financial reasons, which is different, from a commercial enterprise where it's a different discussion and a different thought process. What I think that the challenges I think that can introduce is change management and managing transformation change there needs to be a lot more thought given to how to manage change and how to manage a transformation. Look, I don't think the fundamentals of business change, regardless of what sector you're in, ultimately it's leadership, and you need to have the right leadership to navigate through challenges. So focusing on leadership and focusing on building leadership capability is a very big part of a transformation project. I honestly do think shifting our thinking from an output model, traditional output, to an impact focus has very much helped our thinking from a transformation perspective and helped us prioritize what needs to be transformed and how fast we can go. So I would say, one of the big learnings for me, which I think is transferable to any environment, is the thinking about why you're doing things and what it is that's important and who it is that you're trying to help. So that client focus, which in a commercial organization is about thinking about who it is you're doing this for, who your products for in a commercial sense are, being really client focused. I've had the opportunity to be in many different commercial setups and environments. I think that the language around talking about putting the client at the center, unfortunately, I think that often doesn't necessarily land in the way that it does in a not-for-profit environment. I think when we talk about putting the client at the center and actually transforming around the client with an impact lens and a thought process around impact, that has made it a much more meaningful process, if you like. And from a transformation perspective, has allowed us to bring people on the journey of why we're doing things and the change that we're making. I also don't think you ever get it completely right. Change is difficult. Doesn't matter how much you try and message change or how much you try to explain change. It is a difficult process for many people to experience, and you can always do better. So I certainly won't sit here and say, I think we're managing a fantastic transformation. We've had our challenges, but being anchored with our impact and anchored to our theory of change and being able to really articulate what we're doing and why we're doing and what we're investing in for the outcome that we're driving has made this a transformation that I think is going to make such a difference to the organisation in the long run.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Tim. So now I think I'll ask Adam to show the data activation of the theory of change and impact measurement framework. And thank you for the question that just jumped in. So please do drop your questions in after the demo. I'll come and I'll ask you those questions in a moment. So over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Christy. It's been great to hear from everyone online today and hear the story behind this awesome work. I'm really excited to share the Assistance Dogs Australia Impact Dashboard built on the CareData platform. So if I go onto the Assistance Dogs website, greeted by some really cute dogs, but we can jump in and look at the impact story told on the platform. So this is a CareData dashboard. I'm on here almost every day. I love telling this story because I think it's a really clear way of showing impact and telling the story of how Assistance Dog has moved from reporting just on how many people are they supporting to actually the outcomes from their work. So a little background as has been told today. Social Outcomes worked with Assistance Dogs Australia on defining the theory of change and clarity on what outcomes matter the most. The next step was how do we make that visible and useful? How do we make sure that we're talking about real change in people's lives, not just activity? How do we make this information accessible to everyone? So to donors, to the board, to staff, and the community. While looking at options, ADA chose to embed the impact directly onto their website via a dashboard. So it's kind of hard to tell that it's a dashboard, which is great. But this is the page here. So when someone lands on the dashboard, they immediately see the mission and the headline impact. So they can see over 30 years, 624 lives have been changed. They also see some outcome areas and some information on the work that has been done, which is pulled from the theory of change and adapted to be, within this web page. You can see their goals, and you can see really cool stories and narrative, including video content alongside the page. For us, we're data nerds. We love to see the data behind the work. So you've also got some of the outcome data on the page, so you can see some of the outcomes within the homepage dashboard, all visible and easy to click. So as new data and stories comes in, as the new surveys go out, we can update this dashboard with that data, with those stories, and continue to build and expand on it. So it's a living, breathing document. So I'm going to jump into some outcome areas. We're going to start off with increased independence. So what we have here is an explanation of each section, and the results alongside those sections. So we've got at the top here the information about increased independence for ADA clients and what that means in terms of actual outcomes. So daily care hours with a dog versus without a dog being massively reduced, the story behind that work, the impact on independence, and some more stories and impact detailed throughout the website. So you can see there's a lot of data and information and stories told throughout. There's also the ability for people coming onto the page to directly support this work after learning about the work that is being done. We also have some really cool sections. I definitely implore everyone on this call to jump on following this call and take a look, because there's so much to this and so much awesome work that's gone into it. But as you can see, you can effectively move between the outcome areas and look at the work that's been done behind the scenes. So as ADA, continues to collect data, continues to expand on the work that they're doing, we can keep this updated and live. So in summary, what I love about this approach is being able to pull the impact, the story, the data, the narrative into a dashboard that's able to be, reviewed, updated, and iterative as the organization grows. So thanks everyone for taking a look. Definitely jump on following this call, and I'll hand back to Christy.
Thanks, Adam. So Tim, is there anything you wanted to share about the reporting in particular that struck you through this process?
So absolutely, Christy. First of all, I'm really proud of our website. We've actually just been through a brand refresh at the end of last year. As part of our transformation, we recognized that we needed to modernize and freshen things up, and I'm really proud of what we've got there. The journey of going through our theory of change, the work that we did with Sandy and her team was transformative for us as a leadership group in our thinking. The challenge of telling that story, there's no way we could have got anywhere near what we've got now if we had to try to manage that internally. So I can honestly say, working with you and the team, having the capability that you've brought, the team's brought, has been fantastic. Our ability to tell the story is out of sight compared to where it was. It's really fresh. It's simple. The framework that we've worked on, the experience we had with your team of what are we measuring, why are we measuring, how do we currently measure, how could that look, and then having that on your platform embedded in our website, it's been fantastic, and it adds to our website that ability to actually have people going in to that platform. So yeah, I'm a big fan. It's been fantastic for our organization.
Thanks, Tim. That's great to hear. And I think that it's encouraging to see these come to life, because I think one of the frustrations in our sector, Sandy, is that a lot of work goes into the development of the strategic work, the transformation work, and the data activation is sometimes an afterthought, yet it's a total offering that can then be taken forward, enhanced, built on, and really used as learning as infrastructure as well.
That's right. And what's interesting is that when people start to get into this, they're thinking, oh, we're going to need a team and so on. And we, as people can guess, we work together quite a lot, because it's so much easier to automate all of this. And as you've seen, what Adam was showing to you, it's just live updates on the website. So you don't need a massive team. You need clarity around what you measure and how you express it, automate it, and then pop it up there so the team can see it, so funders can see it, the general public can see it. And it's so much simpler to do it that way. And what we often find in the absence of this kind of data activation is it just sits and it feels too overwhelming, and people don't progress. Even though they really want to, they're kind of stuck as to how. And it's so much cheaper to use automation than it is to employ 2 or 3 people to do this. So we're able to get that cut through in a way that's really efficient. We should be doing that.
Agree. Thank you, Sandy. So I've seen some questions come through. I think we're answering them in the chat. And if anyone has any questions, please drop them in. Tim, it would be great to hear from you. Where to from here? What's next in your journey? And then in a minute, we're going to ask Sandy to talk more about the Impact Culture Australia assessment.
Sure. Thanks, Christy. From an Assistance Dogs Australia perspective, first of all, we've just agreed what our strategy is for the next 10 years and aligned it around our vision of helping 10,000 people in 10 years. What we're doing off the back of that is, first of all, growing our partnership. We're looking to activate our Happy Paws programs, and at the same time, we're looking to grow our presence in each of our states, aligned with our purpose. But from an impact perspective, looking at how to actually leverage the strengths that we've got as an organization, and take that to to achieving those that goal of 10,000 within that time frame. So I think there's a lot of hard work on building out our systems, building out our processes. In a transformation sense, we've really taken a very giant leap forward, and it's put a lot of strain on our existing systems and processes that we need to now bed down. Probably the other thing that's exciting is building out our campus at Orchard Hills. So we've done phase one. We built our and increased our capacity. Now we're looking at building out our whelping centre, building out our puppy kindergarten, which is an innovation we launched 18 months ago, and has been very successful. And incorporating Happy Paws into our Connections program here in Sydney. So giving us both as organisations a base on which to grow the Connections program, which is our program that we run jointly. Lots to look forward to.
Very exciting, and loving to hear about puppy kindergarten. That's exciting.
Can we come?
Absolutely. There's always an invitation.
We're going to come back to the question. So Sandy, just real quick, do you mind, would you be able to share with us about the impact assessment, impact culture assessment?
So I think ADA is a fantastic case study of this idea so we worked together, Tim, for like 6 to 9 months, I think, and we co-designed the theory of change, measurement framework, and the impact strategy. But those could just be documents. Those could be things that sit on Tim's desk, and maybe Tim's doing things with them. But the question is, does that focus on impact find its way into the organisational culture, or is it limited to 1 or 2 individuals who think it's really important? What happens if they move on? So really what we've done over the last 12 months and in partnership with SEER is build an impact culture assessment that allows you to answer a series of questions across 17 different domains to see how embedded that impact focus is inside all the elements of your organisational culture. And then it gives you a benchmark as to how you're going, and it also gives you a tailored development plan of what you could work on next. But I think it's kind of the next step for the sector. As we're now starting to articulate, measure and report on our impact, the next question I think funders are going to be asking us is it embedded? Can I look at the way your organisation functions and find that impact focus threaded throughout everything that you do? So this is an online assessment that you can do at your leisure. There's a free version, which is much shorter. It's just 5 domains, and there's a deep dive, and you can go in and really start to build that capability. And there's very easy to manage action points that you can take that also include resources such as this one. Listen to this webinar and see, a case study of how it's done and that kind of thing. And also support from organisations if you want external support. So it's really trying to up the ante, I suppose, on how we work with this impact focus and make sure that it's embedded. So if you have a look on Impact Culture Australia on the website, you'll see the assessment options there that you can explore.
Thank you, Sandy. That's great. So there's a question here. I'm going to answer Anna's question just in the chat in a moment. There's another question, Tim, about change management and building leadership capability that was needed. Are there any other key skills or competencies that the team needed to implement the theory of change? And if so, how did you acquire those? Formal training, mentoring, or another way?
I would say, so first of all, as Sandy mentioned, we worked with Sandy's team for 6 to 9 months. So it was a really hands-on, deep engagement in building out our theory of change. I think through that process, the understanding of our, how to actually focus on impact and then taking that forward in terms of embedding. I don't think we went through a process where we thought about we don't have the skills or we don't. That hasn't been how the journey has evolved. I think it's been like a light being turned on, where it's been people understanding and thinking differently. It's been more of a mindset shift, and then actually taking that to embed it into the way we do things. So I don't feel like it's been something that we've had to acquire. I think in a change management sense, yes, we've had to bolster our understanding of change management. And we did invest into some change management resource. But I don't feel that it's been something we've had to go and inquire or invest in. I think it's been a process in a leadership sense of greater understanding, and then practice and embedding through what we do, rather than having to actually go and acquire that. Sandy's team it was great. I mean, we built the framework together with them, and going on that journey allowed us to implement it into the organization.
Thanks, Tim. Helen, it's not a tricky question around cost, because that is incredibly important for so many organizations working in the not-for-profit space. So it's a great question. So the automation of data generally happens when we're connecting into your systems or when we're connecting into your survey tools. The setup cost will depend on how many systems we're connecting to, and whether or not the data that sits in your existing systems, and that might be a CRM or it could be a case management solution, whether that data is easily mapped, whether your systems are clean, etc. So in general, once we understand that, we pipeline the data into our platform. We manage all of the open data, and you can also upload Excel spreadsheets in some and unit record level data, or set up aggregate tables. We're fairly agnostic about it. If you need automation and connecting to systems, it's really the setup time that can take a little bit longer than the simplicity of uploading a spreadsheet or a survey tool, etc. For ADA, the setup costs were under $20,000 for the first year, and then ongoing, it's around $9,000 a year. So and we're pricing to that sensitivity for the not-for-profit sector. We also are offering for smaller organisations with less than 2 million in revenue, a 40% discount off our list price. So essentially what we're trying to do is make this viable and possible. Now, the consulting element, Sandy, perhaps you want to speak to that, but on the data activation element, we're really trying hard to make it accessible and, a fraction of what it would cost for, an individual to do that work, which is really, a full-time job.
Yeah. And I've just put a note in the chat saying the reason we set up the assessment tool was we know that consulting for a lot of organisations is just out of the ballpark. And so the assessment tool, because it's on the SEER platform, is really cost effective. So you go and you do a self-assessment, it auto-generates a development plan for you, you implement that at your leisure, and it doesn't cost anywhere near as much as what it would cost to get a consultant in. And the pricing on that, as I said, there's a free version, but the pricing is for small, medium and large organisations, and it's a fraction of what it would cost you to get in a consulting team. So we're trying to make sure that there are options for whatever price point that people can manage. If they want additional help, we make referrals to organisations that are subject matter experts in those areas. But if they want to do it internally, we make sure that there's resources and ideas and action plans to help organisations self-implement.
Thanks, Sandy. So, Angus, are you happy to share? It's a time. So, are you happy to share how to contact us all so that everybody knows? We're offering resources and a consultation. We are committed to making this easy for you. We're always adding new features in the platform, including a number of AI-enabled features. The platform supports data governance, First Nations data sovereignty, and AI assurance as foundations, and a number of new AI applications. So, writing summaries from insights and from your indicators are very helpful. We're working on qual analysis and the ability to ask natural language questions across the open data. So those things are coming very soon. Thank you everybody for joining us. Please book in for a consultation. We'd be delighted to chat with you more. Tim, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing to hear about your journey. Really appreciate it, and congratulations, especially on that very big financial support win this last couple of weeks. So it's always great for us to hear. And thank you again, Sandy, as well, for all of the work that you do to shape and transform impact in Australia.
Thanks,
Pleasure.
Christine.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
See you later.